Is it water with the sheep in the box?
This will be a shorter video than usual here, but I felt it necessary to talk about this because there seems to be a lot of confusion and misconception about this idea since the Maya Forstater legal drama, so I thought I'd provide both context and clarification regarding the state of LGBTQ+ discourse in the UK right now. This isn't a video about Maya Forstater herself, but just for context, she signed the Women's Human Rights Campaign, that's WHRC, as response to the UK's inquiry into the Gender Recognition Act, which contains such statements as transgenderism is a social and historical construction, not a biological one, and will increase or decrease as a result of social forces, and pornography called sissy hypnotizes men to feel as if they are women for the purpose of sexual excitement, as well as claiming that non-binary people have been produced by popular culture and may not exist in the future. Oh, and also explicitly calls for the elimination of transgenderism, so, she's the real deal here. She's the TERF's TERF, the perfect encapsulation of the gender-critical movement. First of all, the backstory. What's going on here? Well, in short, Maya Forstater in 2018 allegedly made several of her work colleagues extremely uncomfortable with her open bigotry, though of course this is unverifiable, even to the point of saying the phrase trans women are women is a literal delusion, publicly expressing her view that trans women are men and also heavily implying that they are potential sexual predators whilst working for a think tank called the Centre for Global Development, or CGD, in March 2019. As a result, her contract was not renewed, which she claimed was due to being discriminated against because of her beliefs, which include that sex is immutable and not to be conflated with gender identity, and that allowing trans people to self-identify will undermine women's rights and protections for vulnerable women and girls. In the initial 2019 tribunal, Forstater tried to invoke the Equality Act, ironically a piece of legislation that protects trans people from the discrimination she was accused of engaging in, and the presiding judge concluded that her beliefs were not worthy of respect in a democratic society, that Forstater was absolutist in her view, and that she was not entitled to ignore the rights of a transgender person and the enormous pain that can be caused by misgendering. She's had a number of rejected appeals, but recently one of her appeals was actually successful. Kinda. And this is where the confusion comes in. So, what exactly happened here? Well, in essence, it was bigotry laws coming up against anti-discrimination and free speech legislation. It does seem as if the judge in the original case did, in fact, make an error in the original ruling, because not worthy of respect in a democratic society wasn't just his opinion, it's an actual legal definition set out within the Equality Act and basically only applies to super extremist views like open neo-Nazism, and we could certainly argue about the validity of that, or whether the law goes far enough, or if it goes too far, or whatever, but the simple fact of the matter is that yes, her opinions on trans people may be subjectively not worthy of respect in a democratic society, but legally that isn't the case. Online, the media and weird transphobes are celebrating this result, claiming that gender-critical beliefs are enshrined in law or some shit, whereas all it really means is that they're not illegal to hold or express, in the same way that you're legally allowed to say that black people are inherently less intelligent or that gay people are causing the downfall of Western society in the abstract. What hasn't changed, though, is the fact that open bigotry, discrimination, harassment, and so on are all still illegal, at least to a point, and doing these things based on a protected characteristic, like, for example, gender identity, are all still covered by anti-discrimination and hate speech laws. I mean, obviously, right? Well, you'd have thought so, but a couple of people online seem to think, or are dishonestly claiming, that this ruling means that they can now just go out and harass trans people, which isn't true. It's not illegal to have and to express gender-critical views, though, I mean, if you do, you're a dickhead, obviously, but being a dickhead has never been illegal. It's not illegal to have and express gender-critical views, just as it's not illegal to be a racist, or even for me to say that I think TERFs are full of shit, because obviously no one's getting arrested for thought crime, but that's literally where it ends. Think of it like the First Amendment over in the US. It's perfectly legal to say whatever you want, but depending on what it is that you say, you may get quite a lot of negative consequences, and you're still beholden to other laws, including those surrounding hate speech and anti-discrimination. As the Trades Union Congress said in a statement, employers have a responsibility to keep all their staff, including trans and non-binary workers, safe from discrimination and harassment. As the judgment has highlighted, this case does not change that. So, where does this leave us? Well, the official ruling does state that just because Forstater's gender-critical views fall under the protected characteristic of religion or belief in the Equality Act 2010, that doesn't necessarily mean that people with gender-critical views are free to deliberately and maliciously misgender, deadname, or otherwise harass trans people. To quote directly from the ruling, "The vulnerability of many trans persons is something we bear very much in mind. This case, however, is not about whether greater protection ought to be afforded to trans persons under the Equality Act, the Gender Recognition Act 2004, GRA, or otherwise, such legislative steps being a matter for Parliament and not for the court. This appeal is about the much narrower issue of whether the claimant's belief as to the immutability of sex is one that amounts to a philosophical belief under Section 10 of the Equality Act. For the reasons we set out below, we have come to the conclusion that it does. That does not mean, however, that those with gender-critical beliefs can indiscriminately and gratuitously refer to trans persons in terms other than they would wish. Such conduct could, depending on the circumstances, amount to harassment of or discrimination against a trans person." The next step for this case, and for Forstater's legal team, is to refocus back on her original claim of having her contract unlawfully terminated. Technically, it was simply not renewed, but I believe under the law this is basically the same thing, based on discrimination. Essentially, they start this whole process over from the beginning, and this is likely to be fought back against by the CGD following news that 87 of Forstater's former colleagues signed a letter to the CEO stating the following: "We were disappointed to learn that the Employment Appeals Tribunal overturned its 2019 ruling in the ongoing case related to Maya Forstater. We believe the original verdict was correct when it found that this type of offensive and exclusionary language and action causes harm to trans people and therefore could not be protected under the Equality Act. The court decision is a step backwards for inclusivity and equality for all. We're truly proud that CGD has fought the case. You have demonstrated that CGD is an organisation which values all our colleagues and is prepared to stand up for the rights of our trans colleagues and friends. By appealing, we would show our support for the rights of our trans colleagues and friends at a time in the UK when they need it most. We believe that CGD must take a consistent stance against all forms of bigotry, including racism, gender discrimination, sexism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and transphobia. This is a moment where we need to live our values and show that we mean them. A far cry from Forstater's claim that I don't think there are many people at CGD who actually think my views are beyond the pale, and I know that there are many who agree with me. Likely, the CGD will try to argue that Forstater represented them poorly and caused reputational damage and or broke the company's internal social media use policies or something, but that remains to be seen, and frankly, until that hearing happens, there's not much point talking about it anymore. So, we shall see how this whole situation plays out, I suppose, and it certainly could have a lot more twists and turns going forward, but it's important to understand that a lot of information and claims out there regarding the implications of this ruling are overblown and often just lies. Gender-critical beliefs are not illegal to hold, just like every belief short of literally Nazism, but they are not afforded any special treatment or priority. Likewise, saying or doing offensive shit will get you pretty severe backlash and consequences, regardless of if you're legally allowed to do so. If you want, you can wear a shirt that says "I hate blacks" on it, but there are likely to be quite a few severe consequences for doing so, and likewise, if you go around talking shit about trans people for no reason, people are going to call you out for it, and if that crosses over into actual harassment, or making your employer look bad, then yes, there can and will be consequences for that. This case is not unique. Remember that people get fired for shit they say on social media all the time, and yes, it's mostly unfair that employers hold so much power over us, but that's the fault of capitalism, not trans people or people who are made uncomfortable by open bigotry. I suppose we'll have to see what happens next in this case, but suffice to say that this victory is not quite the slam dunk that TERFs seem to think it is.